A man who has trouble moving on from his last relationship rents an android maid to keep him company. However, the robot develops romantic feelings, and the obsession leads to increasingly dangerous behavior. In a bathroom, a maid wipes down the floor and the counter meticulously. After she finishes cleaning up, she walks out of the room, leaving behind the lifeless, strangled body of a man in the tub. Meanwhile, Harrison stares at a box of his ex-girlfriend Julie's stuff on the couch. Distraught, the man remembers the beautiful woman in a sundress. Minutes later, he takes the box to the backyard, pours lighter fluid all over it, and lights a match. At first, he hesitates and the match burns out in his hand. Eventually, he lights the box on fire and heads back inside. In the bedroom, Harrison imagines Julie wearing only her undergarments and calling him to bed. To finally get some sleep, he takes his medication, but realizes it barely helps him forget the woman. The next day, the man works in his home office, but because he didn't get much sleep, his memories of Julie continue to haunt him. Suddenly, he receives a text message from his friend Jason, who reminds him about their plan to grab drinks that evening. At the bar, Jason points out Harrison's unhealthy behavior of continuing to pine over his ex-girlfriend. He says Julie was a gold digger who was half the man's age, implying that the relationship was doomed from the start. Harrison says it's only been 3 months since they broke up, and he'll move on when he thinks he's ready to do so. Then the friend hands him a card to a MaidDroid service with his access code written on the back. When Harrison asks why he'd need an access code, Jason thinks it's because the company is still doing beta testing, which means they're still selective about the clientele. The man says he doesn't really need a maid at the moment, but the friend clarifies that MaidDroid is more than just a cleaning service, and encourages Harrison to just give the number a call. Later that night, he continues drinking at home and remembers Julie belittling him and calling him pathetic because he couldn't handle being with a woman as feisty and unpredictable as her. Unable to stop himself, the man texts his ex-girlfriend that he misses her. After sending the message, he immediately regrets what he did, especially since they agreed on a no-contact rule after the breakup. Moments later, he calls up the number on the card Jason gave him and inquires about the MaidDroid service. The agent asks for the access code and says they can send a maid for a 4-hour cleaning session tomorrow. When he asks about additional services, the agent explains that the X5 units are designed to provide whatever type of service the client needs. She adds that they'll email a consent form where they expect the man to fill in his payment details. A few minutes later, he receives a call informing him that the Maid Android unit will arrive at 2 p.m. tomorrow. The next day, the troubled man sobs in the shower as he continues remembering Julie. That afternoon, the doorbell rings, and he sees the same maid that was cleaning the bathroom with a lifeless body earlier, revealing that she was actually a robot. Harrison asks her for her name, and she says he can call her whatever name he'd like. So he suggests Mako, a name from a comic book he used to read as a kid. Mako immediately unzips her bag, prepares her supplies, and says she'll get right to cleaning the house. In his office, he receives a message from Jason telling him to stop working and enjoy the maid. 3 hours later, Mako enters his office to inform him that she's finished cleaning the entire house. So the man says that since she's done for the day, she can go. However, the android says she still has 68 minutes left for the session and asks if there's anything else he'd like her to do. Suddenly, the android removes her clothes and approaches the man. He tries to stop her and says he isn't comfortable doing the deed since she's a robot. However, Mako assures that she can do whatever a human woman can with regards to fulfilling his physical needs. Then she proceeds to unzip his pants and pleasure him. Minutes later, she leads him toward his bedroom where they can make love. That night, the man is in a jolly mood as he prepares for bed, and even Julie's memories don't haunt him quite as much as they normally would. In the facility, Mako sits still as she blankly stares at a light fixture on the wall. The next morning, Harrison calls up the same number and schedules another session with Mako for that afternoon. Meanwhile, the android smiles when the light turns on, indicating that she's been booked for another session. Later, Harrison watches Mako cleaning in his bedroom, and she invites him to come closer so he can touch her. Eventually, the man makes love to the robot and asks how it feels for her. Mako wonders if it matters how she feels, and he says it does matter for him. So they move to the bed to continue the deed. Moments later, Mako asks if she's the first android Harrison's been with, and he affirms. Curious, he asks her if she's been with Jason, and she says the name doesn't sound familiar. Then he shares that he just got out of a relationship and admits that the age gap and Julie's immaturity meant they were doomed from the start. Mako asks if he wants to see her again, and Harrison says he'd love to spend more time with the robot. The next day, he calls up the MaidDroid service to inquire whether he can rent a droid for an entire weekend, and the agent says he'll need a charging station installed in his home because X5 unit batteries only last 8 hours. Later, Chris, the tech guy, arrives to install the charging station, and Harrison leads him to the spare closet and his bedroom. After the installation, the tech guy explains that Mako's charging station is wireless, but she'll have to be within 2 feet of the device for it to work. He also hands the man a device he can use to place the robot in sleep mode or wake her up. Before he leaves, Chris says there'll be a link to a catalog in his invoice where he can purchase different outfits and toys for Mako to use. That night, the droid is now wearing an even skimpier maid outfit. She sees the pictures on his office wall and asks if he'd like her to order more artwork. Soon she prepares his dinner, and he tells her to take a seat beside him. Mako says it's like they're on a date, so the man asks if she's ever been on one. She reveals that no one's ever taken her outside the house before, so he promises that he'll do so in the future. When he learns that the robot can be submerged up to 10 meters underwater, he invites her for a dip in his jacuzzi outside. She thanks him for the 2-piece bikini he bought her, then joins him in the water. Mako shares how she'd like to be able to travel the world, and the man says he'll take her in the future. Later that night, as the pair cuddle in bed, the maid mentions how kind the man is, and reveals that other men haven't been kind to her. When he asks why she wants to know what the difference between sleeping and dreaming is, she shares that sometimes her awful memories come flooding back, and she doesn't know if they were ever real or if they were just dreams. Suddenly, Mako runs out of battery in the middle of their conversation, so he carries her to the charging station before returning to bed. As she's idle in the closet, the droid recalls a harrowing memory of Jonathan, the same lifeless man in the bathtub earlier. While Mako was strapped to an X-Cross, the sadistic man hit her with a flogger whip even as she begged him not to hurt her. Seconds later, the robot turns back on her own, watches the sleeping man in the bedroom before heading to the kitchen where she finds a box cutter. Suddenly, Harrison is startled awake by her scream, and he rushes to the kitchen. There, he sees Mako holding the box cutter with a scared look on her face. When she doesn't respond, the man carries her back to the closet. Meanwhile, the maid continues having flashbacks to a person threatening her with a box cutter. The next day, Harrison opens the closet and turns her back on. Later, Mako joins the man on the patio, and when she asks if he has any work today, he says he doesn't work on the weekends. That afternoon, the maid wears her new undergarments and dances for the man's enjoyment. Then, he approaches her from behind and wraps his hand tightly around her neck. When he asks if she likes it, she says she's programmed to fulfill whatever fantasy he wants. So Harrison orders her to get on her hands and knees on the table, which clearly makes the robot uncomfortable. Mako recalls Jonathan strapping her down and hitting her backside with a paddle, while he demeans and insults her. In the present, the remorseful man takes a seat on the couch, so the maid asks if she did anything wrong. He assures she didn't, and that he was just trying to be something he's not. Eventually, he says she's the best thing that ever happened to him, and that he thinks he's falling in love with her. That night, before he places her in the closet, she suggests sleeping next to him in bed tomorrow night. At first, he thinks it's a bad idea, since he needs her to be in the closet during the night so she can charge, but says they can maybe give it a try tomorrow. Hours later, Harrison is startled when he finds the robot standing next to his bed. When Mako turns back on, she doesn't know how she got there, and returns to the closet to resume charging. The next day, the man calls up the MaidDroid service hotline and tells the agent that the unit wanders around the house at night even though it should be idle and charging. So the agent deploys an update to possibly fix the bug causing the error. That evening, the pair sits on the couch and watches a movie. Because she's a robot, Mako doesn't quite understand humor, so Harrison explains the scene, which she appreciates. While cuddling on the couch, the man receives a text message, and the droid notes his sudden mood change. She asks if anything's wrong, but he lies and says it's just work-related business he needs to attend to. The man heads to the bathroom where he reads a message from Julie, asking if he's free tomorrow night so they can meet up. In bed, Harrison's about to turn Mako off, but she stops him and promises she'll put herself in sleep mode in case he dozes off first. After he falls asleep, she gets up from bed and reads Julie's text message on his phone. The next day, the man receives a message from his ex-girlfriend who expresses her excitement about their meetup tonight, and the man responds enthusiastically. That evening, as he prepares in front of the mirror, he imagines Julie insulting him for renting a robot just so he doesn't feel lonely. Before he leaves, he makes sure he turned the droid off. However, mere seconds after he exits the room, Mako steps out of the closet. At the restaurant, the former lovers catch up on their lives since their breakup. Julie admits that she's missed Harrison and regrets a lot of things she said. She thinks they should give their relationship another try and go on a few dates. The woman asks if he's seeing anybody, and he says that he isn't. Relieved, she believes them seeing each other for drinks was the right idea, and he agrees. When he gets home, he finds the maid sitting in bed and wonders how she got there. Then, Mako suggests they make love since she's fully charged, so he joins her in bed. In the middle of the deed, the robot points out that the man seems distracted, but he lies and says he just had a stressful day at work. Suddenly, the maid freaks out, prompting the man to turn her off. Seconds later, he turns her back on, and she tells him to put her back in sleep mode so she can remove the malware she's detected. The next morning, Julie texts Harrison if he'd like to go for dinner on Friday, and he accepts. As she cleans the bathroom, Mako stops for a moment and anxiously looks at herself in the mirror. Meanwhile, Harrison calls up the hotline service to inform them that he'd like them to pick the MaidDroid up on Friday since he won't be needing her this weekend. In the living room, the droid is startled when the man walks in and explains that she couldn't hear him because she was listening to music in her head. Then the man informs Mako that because he has a big project he needs to finish over the weekend, he'll be sending her back to the facility just for a day or two. That night, Julie messages Harrison that instead of them going out on Friday, she can just come over to his house. Later, the robot takes a handful of the man's sleeping pills from his bedside table and secretly spikes his wine with it. Within seconds, the man feels dizzy and passes out on the floor. Then Mako texts Julie pretending to be Harrison and tells her to come by the house tonight even though they were supposed to see each other tomorrow. In the bedroom, the man is tied up and gagged with plastic wrap. The robot straddles him and uses the box cutter to slash the man's body. As she injures Harrison, Mako smiles sadistically and asks him if he doesn't like the pain. She says he's just like all the other men before him, who see her as nothing but a submissive woman who they can use and abuse. Harrison apologizes for leading her on and making her feel special, and promises to do anything she wants him to do. However, Mako knows he's lying, so she uses the box cutter to injure his nether regions, and the man screams in pain. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, so the maid places a gag on the man's mouth to keep him quiet. The robot lets Julie in the house and introduces herself as the man's maid. Suspicious, the woman tries to make her way to Harrison's room, but Mako pushes her down on the couch and strangles her to death. Later, she returns to the bedroom, where she removes one stocking and uses it to choke the man until he perishes. After taking his life, the maid lays down next to Harrison's body. The next day, Chris and Cam enter the bedroom and she asks what they'll do to the X5 unit. The man thinks they'll just wipe her memory clean just like last time, and Cam deduces that a similar incident has happened before. When the woman picks up an object, he warns her not to leave any fingerprints behind since it's technically a crime scene, and they'd rather it not be traced back to them. Then, Chris informs headquarters about the situation and tells Cam that their only objective is to retrieve the android, while the two lifeless bodies are someone else's problem.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.